In Astra Malorum, we learn why Nikolai is here. Because this is an interesting question because it hasn't been fully explained why all the characters ended up in this world, in the Dark Ether, why the Warden wanted their souls. But we've been slowly getting explanations for characters after characters, and in Astra Malorum, we learn why Nikolai was brought into the Dark Ether. And honestly, his is by far the darkest one yet. Now, to really understand the context of this, we have to set a little bit of the backstory to all of this and understand why the Warden really picked all these people to bring down to the Dark Ether and then take their soul. Because this was actually explained to us in Ashes in the midway through cutscene by the entity. The entity tells us that the Warden wants people who have been touched by something of value, something that is strong and maybe even tied to the Dark Ether. And of course, for the Requiem characters, this is immediately revealed to be the Sentinel artifact that we interacted with, so that made sense for them. And in Ashes, we learn with the Dempsey side Easter egg that the reason why he was brought here was because he was one of the first people to use the Disciple injection from his universe. In fact, Weaver forced him to use it. And of course, the Disciples are very powerful beings from the Dark Ether, so that's what touched him and made his soul valuable to the Warden. And that's why the Warden brought them there. That's why he wanted their souls. And in Astra Malorum, we learn why he wanted Nikolai's soul. But to understand this Nikolai, we have to understand the context of where he comes from. Because where he's actually from is 1984, and he's a Soviet fighting in the Afghan war. And we hear a little bit of the backstory here that the Spetsnaz suspect randomly people of harboring terrorists and would just slaughter entire villages. And Nikolai sees this and wants to stop this. So he gets to the village before the Spetsnaz do, and he tries to save these villagers. And what he does is he directs them to some caves, and he tells them to stay there until he comes back and lets them know it's safe. And once it's finally safe, he comes back and walks in through these caves, and he can't find anybody. And as he walks deeper and further into these caves, the worst thing imaginable happens. And this is where he comes across the dead bodies of all the villagers. Man, woman, and child. They're all dead. Faces torn off and their eyes taken out of their sockets. And as he goes deeper and deeper into these caves, he finds exactly what did it. First seeing this painting on the wall of this demon, painted with blood and glowing red eyes. But then further going into it, he finds this altar dedicated to this demon. And this is where Nikolai realized what happened. This demon killed the entire village. But we learned that this wasn't entirely all an accident, because this demon may have been a part of it the whole time. Because first what the demon tells Nikolai is that after Nikolai directed these villagers to stay in these caves, once he leaves them there, the demon starts to use his voice, Nikolai's voice, a voice that these villagers trust, and he uses it to call these villagers deeper and deeper into the caves, until this demon finally gets their hands on him and slaughters all of them. But it goes even deeper than that, because this demon may have been using Nikolai from the start, because we hear the demon say this.
You bear my sign, little soldier. You served me well.
You bear my sign, little soldier. You served me well. And now I start to wonder if it wasn't just an accident by Nikolai telling them to go into these caves, but before that, Nikolai had already been in contact with this demon, and the demon, whether Nikolai knew or not, probably not obviously, was manipulated by this demon to direct these villagers to this cave. Now, when the demon could have touched Nikolai and marked him with his sign as the demon says, we don't know, but if it's always been in these caves, I could imagine what may have happened is that when Nikolai was looking for somewhere to hide these villagers, he went to the cave by himself first. And when he went in there, that's when the demon found him and marked him. And then he manipulated him in order to bring the entire village there so he could slaughter them all. And that's the tragedy of Nikolai. But this does explain what Nikolai was touched by that the Warden wanted his soul. He was touched by this demon, and that marked his soul. And that's why the Warden wanted it. But there's still something much bigger going on here. Something that should give you chills just hearing it. And that is the identity of this demon. Because something I haven't mentioned is that they've actually gave us the name of this demon. And it's actually Torbala. Now that name really isn't tied to anything in real life that I'm aware of, and it seems like it's only made for this story. But I think this demon isn't just a regular demon, and instead may be from the Dark Ether. And the reason I say this is if we try to figure out the identity of this, we have one humongous hint for this. And this is the first time that we see this demon, and it's in this blood painting of him. Because in this blood painting, we see he has horns, and we see his eyes glowing, but if we look at his chest, we see a symbol there. And that's not something that should be unfamiliar to us. Anybody who has played Astra Malorum would recognize this symbol, because this symbol is actually directly tied to Mars and one of the pillars there. In fact, there's multiple of these symbols used during the main Easter egg to get to the final step of it. In fact, that's how you unlock the final boss fight where you fight the Shadowsmith, is using one of these symbols. So am I telling you that Torbala is actually a Martian trying to kill everybody? I mean, maybe, but there's another thing about that same blood painting that may be further giving out its identity. And that's if you look at its markings on its body, because you see these wavy lines all over it. And once again, that's something we've seen before, and we've seen it on someone else. And that was none other than Caltheris, the Shadowsmith from this map. The only other characters to have these lines on their body. Now, am I saying that Caltheris and Torbala are the same person? Maybe, but we can't be for certain. But the fact that we see those same markings on the body of both Caltheris and Torbala are interesting. And it's even more interesting the fact that we see the same symbols that we use to call Caltheris to the boss fight arena is also seen on Torbala. And that's fascinating to me. But at the same time, we don't know if there's more people. This could just be a random person from Mars, or someone that we've never seen before, or some just weird dark ether entity. But if Torbala and Caltheris are the same person, we may need to keep an eye out for her. And more importantly, we may need to keep an eye out for Nikolai, because Torbala leaves us off with one message at the end of the Nikolai Easter egg.
You bear my sign, little soldier. You served me well, and will do so again.
You served me well, and you will do so again. It seems like Torbala is not done with Nikolai, and he's still marked by Torbala. And I mean, isn't it a bit of a coincidence that Caltheris is the one who returned Nikolai's soul? Again, not saying 100% it is the same person, but it really is so suspicious. But regardless if they're the same person or not, Torbala may not be done, because it says it'll serve them again. And considering it manipulated Nikolai before, it may manipulate him again. And this is why we may need to keep an eye out for Nikolai. Oh, and that's the story of Nikolai. It is a deep and dark one. And I just had to share it with you guys because my gosh, was this something else. But regardless though, I love to hear what you guys think about this. As dark as it is, I'd still love to hear your thoughts and opinions on this one. But regardless though, that's going to wrap it up for this one. Thank you guys all so much for watching. See you guys in the next one.